Hi everybody, welcome to this episode of Arcs Jason. Today I got a great question from a long-time supporter of the channel, Darlene. And Darlene asks two questions, well really one question, but this is kind of what she says through my website. Life and people annoy me a lot of the time. Why am I so triggered? What is the Eastern approach to this problem? Love your work. Thank you, Darlene, thank you. So before we answer this question, make sure you like, subscribe to my channel. Make sure you turn on all bell notifications if you want my work to reach a wider audience. And if my work has benefited you in any way, please consider contributing to my Patreon page. Any small donation is appreciated. And, you know, I love and appreciate all you guys. I love this community. I don't take it for granted, okay? I don't take it for granted. And I hope you guys don't take it for granted as well. So I enjoy speaking to you guys every week. So let's get down to it. So yes, why am I so triggered? What is the Eastern approach to this problem? Life and people annoy me a lot of the time. Yes, I think that when we all follow the spiritual path, we kind of encounter this problem, right? Like people get annoyed with the way the world is, how unconscious people can be, how ignorant society can treat people, the inequality in the world, and so forth and so on. We could talk about it all day, right? So, but then when we turn it back on ourselves, when we look at ourselves from a spiritual perspective, and we see ourselves actually as part of the problem, as what Darlene is pinpointing, is she has noticed that she is triggered. She's emotionally triggered by things in the world and people, and life in general just annoys her. And so we all deal with this to a certain degree, right? Those who are far advanced on the spiritual path, it doesn't really bother them as much. But we have to unpack this and we have to see what is the problem, right? So when we look at being triggered in general, right? First of all, being triggered online is a relatively new phenomenon. Most of us have existed pre social media and so forth and so on, who are watching this. So we know that when we are in the natural world, in the real world, that people would say things to us, but you kind of just let it go, right? Because there's social cues, there's repercussions if you do get into conflict with someone in the real world. It's the real world. There's a whole social dynamic that if you sit there arguing, next minute people are in a fisticuffs fight. I mean, this is not good for anybody, right? So most sane and healthy people usually avoid those sorts of confrontations, and that's why most people in the real world are generally good. And so, but what's happened is the mischievousness of a lot of us is kind of projected into this digital world, where we allow all of our emotions and beliefs and everything to run wild, right? And it's become this very toxic world where a lot of people are suffering from depression and psychological problems because of being bullied online and people being very insensitive. I don't understand this idea that the digital world is something different to the real world. The behavior that, you know what I mean? Like, they are different worlds, but why is the behavior different? This is something that we need to talk about, and this is where I have zero tolerance for people who misbehave online, because they would not do it face to face with people. They're usually basement dwelling creatures with Cheetos all over their face, these trolls that you think about. So the being emotionally triggered is a problem with identity. It's a problem with your beliefs, Darlene, and it's a problem with the way that you think the world should be, right? And I know that that's a hard pill to swallow, but from an Eastern spiritual, you want to know the Eastern spiritual approach. The Eastern spiritual approach is that we cannot act from this limited identity. This identity is limited. This idea of jiva is a conditioning that we've accumulated through our life, which doesn't exist. And so if you're acting out of that, then you're only causing more drama. You're adding more noise and you're adding more fuel to the fire. When the Eastern spiritual approach is to try and cleanse the jiva, cleanse all of these beliefs and these agendas and so forth and so on out of the psyche, and allow your natural spontaneity and tranquility to shine forth, which is not emotionally triggered by this and that. Being emotionally triggered and being emotional comes from our belief in our own identity. When you go to a psychiatrist, they're not going to tell you this because they're going to put band-aid solutions on your psychological problems and this and that. But they're not going to the root cause, which is identity. It's a belief in your identity. And that's why the Eastern spiritual paths are so powerful, especially when we look at Vedanta, Zen, Taoism, and even Theravada, Buddhism, and these paths are so powerful because it's exposing that the identity is the problem. Your belief in the identity, my belief in that I'm Jason and that I'm separate from everything and anyone else, is basically a cognitive error. And you're only identifying with this part of your brain, this prefrontal cortex, where you're cutting the world up according to your own beliefs to suit yourself, right? And when anything conflicts with that, then that's when you get triggered. That's when your emotional response arises, right? So this is almost like a disembodied state of mind where your mind is not embodied. The two functions of your mind are not working properly. One is working, and then when something messes with your version of reality, then you shut the prefrontal cortex down and you allow the hot cognition, the emotional reaction, just to take over, and then who knows what can happen from that state, right? A lot of bad things will happen from that state, that's to be sure, So we really need to rein in our beliefs and our agendas and stop interfering with life. You know what I mean? You have to really be like a Taoist in the world, where you don't interfere and you allow the world to be, and you don't contribute to more of the chaos. How is the world going to benefit, darling, if you are part of the noise as well? There's already too many people part of that unconscious chorus in the world. We don't need that. You obviously have a deep interest in Eastern spirituality. We need you to we need you to come back to your nature, which is peaceful, tranquil, and intelligent, actually. And so when you come, it's interesting when you begin to get out of those beliefs and those agendas and that sort of emotional realm. That's when you begin to act spontaneously intelligent in the world, where you, in some sense, like in Zen, where you act appropriate and immediate to each and every situation. So you're acting immediate, but you have an appropriate reaction to each and every situation. And so that's what deep meditation actually does. It allows you to do that. That's what Zen is. And so if you're not practicing meditation and you're not practicing, or you're not practicing meditation properly, then your reaction to the world will still be emotional. Now, it's not to say that you won't slip up. We all slip up. I've seen Zen masters slip up. I've seen Advaita teachers go mad. I mean, it happens. You have to remember we are all humans still in the end, but you don't want to be at odds with your own humanity. You know what I mean? You don't want to make yourself like that you're out there and then those people are there. You're still part of the world. It's just the difference between you and the unconscious tribe is that you have woken up and you see the world for what it is. But what still lags is some sort of beliefs that you have about how the world should be or about yourself, right? and we can't discount too that when people follow a spiritual path or they become, in air quotes, spiritual, then we even create different beliefs, spiritual beliefs about how the world should be and so forth and so on. You see this a lot with people who become very pious about their food habits or their way of seeing the world, you know what I mean? Like someone may be, for example, a vegan, and think that the whole world should be vegan, and you know, I mean, like we develop these beliefs about ourselves. The better approach is if you're going to be vegan, be humble, be vegan. You don't have to go and promote it to everyone and virtue signal to everyone. We need to remember that spirituality is not about virtual signaling. That again is Western mentality infecting Eastern spirituality. Eastern spirituality is about being humble and not being such a what do you call it? Not being such a big noter about oneself, right? Oh, I'm vegan, I'm Buddhist, I meditate, I practice peace, so forth and so on. We don't want to fall into that category. You want to remain humble. Keep the path that you're following, in some sense, to yourself. You know, obviously, you will attract people interested into this. That's why that's why you watch my videos, and that's why you're part of this small community that I have here. And so, you know, that's something that you need to think about. That, you know, you don't want to become a big noter. You don't want to virtue signal, because instantly when you become someone who is someone who virtue signals, is you already have a belief and an agenda of how the world should be. That's actually what causes conflict in the world, no matter how pious your beliefs are, right? We could say it's a pious belief, right, to be vegan and to, you know, everyone, I think, is in chorus. Everyone is against industrialized farming, the way that, you know, what we're doing. But if you're going around and beating a drum and carrying on and virtue signaling, you're still in opposition to the world, so to speak. We need to allow the world to sometimes to run its course. You know what I mean? Especially from an Eastern spiritual perspective. And if you disagree with what I've just said then Eastern spirituality may not be for you. And that's okay. That's okay. Most of the people in the world are pious and are virtue signalers. So if you want to join them, then that's all well and good. But if you're deeply interested in spirituality and the path of peace, the path of being tolerant and compassionate and having empathy for everyone and anything in the world, then Eastern spirituality is for you. Yeah. So we have to consider that if we are triggered, then it's actually a problem that we have. We have over-identified with our beliefs and our experience. You know, I get this a lot through the comments on YouTube where, you know, people who believe that they are spiritual get so emotionally triggered about the smallest thing I may say, which crowds out the actual context of the videos that I'm creating, right? So one little thing, and then that's it. Like that negativity bias crowds everything out. And that's the height of an unsteady mind, right? And the height of someone who hasn't actually embraced their spirituality. So that's something for you to consider as well, because if you are emotionally triggered, then that is evidence that you are not spiritual, that your mind has not come back to equanimity, you know, because an equanimous mind is not affected by the changing tides, the different events that we experience in life. It's completely steady and ready for anything that comes its way. So that's something for all of us to think about, not just yourself, Darlene, but all of us to think about. So I hope you guys got a lot out of that today. It's an interesting topic. You know, we could talk about this a lot because unfortunately we live in a reality where a lot of people are triggered about many circumstances. I'm not sure why. I mean, I do know why, because a lot of people are using social media and this and that, hiding behind their screens to project their own inadequacy, their own pain, and their own misguided beliefs on other people, because they want, it's almost like a survival technique. They want people to think the same. Please think the same as me, so then I feel safe. The sage is a rebel to society. They don't care what people think. They don't want to be part of the in crowd or the group. They don't have any beliefs of that they're associated with a group, so to speak. You know what I mean? So We may call them a Taoist or a Vedantist, but to them, they're completely empty and tranquil. And they're not acting out of that insecure perspective. When we are trying to get people to join our way of thinking and our way of belief and our beliefs, then that's an act of insecurity. In trying to be secure, we are creating division, which in that case creates insecurity and creates an unstable world. So that's something we also need to consider. We also need to consider that. And so a lot of people don't think deeply about their actions and about what they're doing. But if you are there and you're trying to get people to think the way that you think or believe what you believe, then this is, in some sense, an evolutionary strategy that we had once upon a time to survive, but we don't need it anymore. We need people to stand on their own 2 feet and also be okay with being a complete black sheep and an outsider. Seriously. I mean, that's been my whole entire adult life. I've been the outsider, and I'm okay with it. I'm okay with people not believing what I believe. I mean, if you're interested in Eastern spirituality and this and that, there's not many people out there who actually think this way in the traditional sense. There's a lot of people who are New Agers and we don't want to get into that, but in the traditional sense, and who are really invested their life into spiritual exploration and the spiritual process, which I am, and I hope you are too. So these are many things that we all need to think about. So I hope you guys enjoyed that episode of Ask Jason, and there's just so much for us to unpack when we talk about these certain topics. And I hope that for yourself, Darlene, and for everyone listening, I hope that you are doing your best not to be emotionally triggered. Because if you are meditating properly, you are catching yourself when you're triggered, right? You need to catch yourself when you're triggered. And then you need to realize that you are going to act out of a sense of identity. That doesn't exist. It's an accumulated sense of identity. So, you know what I mean? So we have to really be committed to that if you're on the spiritual path. And that's what our meditation practice should be doing. We should be able to catch ourselves before you start trolling or you disagreeing with people online. Red flag on the play. Yes. No. Don't do that. We need people to be more nice, to be more intelligent, and just to be more peaceful. What's so wrong with having peaceful people? I've never understood that. I just don't understand. I don't understand the taboo against being nice. I just don't get it. People are investing so much into being an a-hole. It's definitely not the right way to go about things. So I hope you guys are actually achieving that in your meditation practice. And I hope that you do refrain from contributing to more noise in the world. Shanti, shanti, shanti.